You're listening to Pennsylvania Mountain Stories, a book of Appalachian folktales compiled by Henry W. Shoemaker. This book was published in 1911, and I'm afraid the language reflects the biases and prejudices of the time. A Ghost of Aughwick. I had not thought the house was haunted. I had lived in it alone for a long time and had never seen or heard anything out of the ordinary. In fact, it was my boast that of all places I had lived, I practically never dreamed here. Besides, I was, and am getting to be again, a skeptic, especially on the subject of apparitions. But the old house should have had a ghost, even if for so long it seemed to be without one. It had been built many years before the Revolutionary War, on a grant direct from William Penn. It stands on a high hill which slopes down to the west branch of the Susquehanna. Across the river the Bald Eagle Mountains end, and to the east the view runs as far as it can follow the winding river. Great trees surround the house: white pines, oaks, hemlocks, maples, beeches, birches, gums, and wild cherries. On either side of the stone gate stands an enormous tree, one a white pine, the other a hemlock, the former planted by Conrad Weiser to commemorate a visit to the old manor house, the latter set out by my ancestor, as a witness to the tree planted by the distinguished guest. With such surroundings and such historic memories, it seemed a shame that the prosaic 20th century should rob Aughwick, for that was the name of the estate, of visitants that appeared in similar surroundings in days gone by. One evening in July, it was about 7:45, and not yet dark, but to keep the house cool, the outside shutters were closed, which made it seem darker. I walked down the hall from the dining room and into the library. As I went in, I instinctively stopped short to avoid running into the slender figure of a young woman. Her outlines were not very distinct, but she seemed to be a brunette, although her large, full eyes were the color of the waters of Maiden Creek, that beautiful stream in Berks County. Before I could say, "Beg pardon," the figure had gone, and I was in the high-ceilinged library alone. I could dimly see the white marble bust of the Roman poet, Lucretius, my favorite literary guide, on one of the lofty bookcases. I ceased to remember what brought me to the library, and went out, and on the piazza. 15 minutes later, I came to the realization that Aughwick had a ghost. Probably a month later, when the recollection of my experience had grown dimmer, I happened in the library about the same time. Though the hour was the same, the room was darker. I brushed up against the white-robed figure, but she was gone before I could ask for explanations. Less than a week after that, I was absolutely alone in the house. The servants had left early to go to camp meeting in a grove somewhere near Williamsport. It was the same hour, and intentionally I ventured to the door. I could see the figure start up suddenly from a large easy-chair and come towards me. The fact that it had assumed such a human pose as sitting in an easy-chair demolished all my fears in an instant, and I asked her pardon very obsequiously for disturbing her. She did not answer, so again I expressed apologies, and held out my hand in a friendly gesture. Seeing that she was not making any effort to retreat, I told her that I was glad to see her, and hoped she would make herself at home. I marvel now, when I look back, at the thought of myself talking up to a ghost. Her next move was to start towards the door, but I stopped her by saying I was lonely, and wouldn't she tarry a little while to keep me company? Then she spoke for the first time. "I am indeed glad to stop a while," she said. "You are the first person I have spoken to in a long, long interval. I cannot measure it in time, it is so long." I replied I was happy to talk to her, and hoped, especially as we met under such odd circumstances, we could be friends. "You remind me greatly," she said, "of a friend I had here long, long ago. I thought you were he, until you spoke." I said I thought he must be some relative, for although the old house had been deserted for a period of 40 years before I came there, it had never been out of the family since it had been built. The spirit looked me over again and said, "I am sorry you are not the same person I have been waiting for now so long." I asked her to tell me the story of this friend who resembled me, and said I might help her find him again. "I came here with him," she said. "He was the loveliest man I had ever met, and we were very happy here for a brief time. It seemed no time at all. How delightful it all was! We rode on the river and took horseback trips up and down the valley. Sometimes I went out with him when he shot the wild pigeons in the tall beech and maple trees. In the evenings he read poetry or talked philosophy. I did not understand either, but felt perfectly happy. He had found me in Philadelphia, in Front Street, where the ships come in. I had not been over long from London. This was a wild country, but so different from anywhere I had been, it did not seem lonely. I had a husband in the old country, a hardened criminal, but I considered myself free from him when I stowed away on the ship that brought me to America. I never wrote a letter after I reached this country, and had changed my name every month. The man who looked like you was very much in love with me. He was always with me, except when he went out for deer or wolves, and took trips for political reasons, for he was a member of Congress. I held my breath. I knew who the man was, but I did not tell her. One night, in summer, I was expecting him back from Washington City, but not until late. It was too early and too hot to light the lights, so I was sitting in this room, in a chair placed in this corner, waiting and thinking. I could think of nothing else but him. Just before 8 o'clock, I heard footsteps coming in the back door and down the long hall. I jumped up, thinking, for some reason, his horse had brought him from the stage landing quicker than usual. I looked up, and to my horror beheld a hideous face, the face of a drunkard and a fiend, a face that had given way to every passing lust and whim. My husband. Before I could scream, he was upon me. I must have fainted, for when I came to, I was covered with blood, and speechless. He had gone, and above me, with trembling hands, holding wavering candles, stood my friend, the master of the house, still in spurs and riding boots, surrounded by his faithful servants. My eyes were open, but I could not say a word. My heart was still, I was conscious, but outwardly I was dead. The grief of my friend was terrible to witness. He sat on the floor calling me by name, "Helen, Helen, Helen," in outbursts of passionate lamentation. Later, several bearded doctors arrived, who shook their heads and tried to lead the sorrowing lover into another room. In the midst of this pitiful scene, everything grew black, and I knew no more. After a while, it may have been 5 years or 10 years, I cannot judge time, my personality seemed to reassemble itself and possess the power to move at will out of oblivion. Guided by my strong desire, I found myself back in this room. It was empty. No sign could I find of my friend or any other living soul. I kept coming back, and one night I discovered the room nicely fitted up, and I began to feel sure he would return. It seemed an age before anyone visited the library at dusk. The night I heard your footsteps in the hall, I was certain it was my lost friend, and I rushed forward to meet him, and it was almost the man, but not quite. Now who was he that so resembled you? Reluctantly, I had to admit he must have been a cousin of my grandfather's, who was master of Aughwick for some years, until he suddenly refused to live there any longer, and spent most of the remainder of his life in Illinois. During the Civil War, being an ex-congressman, he obtained a commission, but was accounted missing after Shiloh. While telling the story, a warm breeze seemed to sweep across the gloomy room. I gazed through the darkness. The ghost was gone. Vainly have I watched for her since, until, with the passage of time, I am reverting to my old disbeliefs. I hope she will return, as Aughwick should have a ghost, but one that will be more consistent in its appearances. Perhaps she is wandering now among the monuments at Shiloh.